everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. I, of course, am Mr. Warren Hayes, your host here on this podcast, where we are going to be talking about professional wrestling for a couple of hours here or so, right here on youtube.com/MrWarrenHayes, or on your favorite podcast application, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. I am there as well, and you are here as well. How about that? And since you're here already, well, why don't you leave a like if you're watching this on YouTube, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star rating on Spotify. All that stuff helps out a great deal and would be, very welcome. And I would welcome that type of little help to get the podcast to grow. And I would also welcome you on the Mr. Warren Hayes Show Discord. The link is in the description if you want to come and join in and chat about pro wrestling. We would love to have you, just like I love having you here this week. I am back from a couple of weeks away on vacation. I've been easing my way back into the streaming over on YouTube, and I've been back doing the Dynamite reviews. This is the first Mr. Warren Hayes Show podcast that I've done since coming back from vacation, seeing All In Texas, which was tremendous. I did a review, by the way, of All In Texas if you want to get my full thoughts and how good it was and what kind of vibes were there. I covered it all. It's available. I believe, on both podcasts and YouTube, right? It's right there. Come to think of it, I did both. I'm a completionist. So we got all of that out there, and listen, I'm very thankful that you are all here as well, ready to join me for another session of pro wrestling. And what are we talking about tonight, Warren? Well, thank you for asking. We are going to do a week recap of the G1 Climax 35 that's happening right now in New Japan Pro Wrestling. We've got, of course, we're going to talk about Hulk Hogan, more Mercedes Moné stuff going on. Look, contract things with New Japan, and not New Japan, but AEW and CMLL. Yeah, we're sprinkling with a bunch of stuff this week. It's we're covering quite a few things. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much for being here. Let's get to it. So today, as we're recording this on July 24, 2025, we learned today that Terry Bollea, known to the world as Hulk Hogan, has died at the age of 71. According to TMZ, emergency medical responders, were dispatched to his Florida home after what was believed to be a cardiac arrest. For weeks, rumors had been swirling about Hogan's declining health, basically fueled by his former friend Bubba the Love Sponge, who claimed Hogan was on the verge of death and that his families had already said their goodbyes. The wild thing here is that Bubba and Hulk had, of course, a tremendous falling out, and they were not on good terms. So it's absolutely wild that he was the guy. This was happening weeks ago, right? I think like around July 8th or something like that, he started talking about how Hogan was dying, and so on and so forth. And I was, talking about all this stuff, and at first you sort of chuckle at it and you go, ha, well, it's Bubba the Love Sponge. He's probably full of shit because he's super unreliable. But imagine if he was right, but he's probably just full of shit. But then you start seeing the signs. You start noticing really that no one is really all that much coming out and forcefully trying to disprove this. And, Eric Bischoff went on to Ariel Helwani to talk about the freestyle gimmick that he and Hulk are starting up, right? And he came on last week, right? And in retrospect, you sort of look at it and you say to yourself, well, this was kind of weird because Hulk Hogan wouldn't miss an opportunity to go on a media tour, to do anything media related and show his face and show that he was still involved in stuff, right? Why did Bischoff go alone? Apparently he was not doing well. And the wild thing is that the wild thing is that all in the meantime it was all Bubba the Love Sponge, who was at the heart of this, keeping people informed and making sure people understood how things, how making sure this news, these rumors were being circulated that Hulk was not doing well. And it's just wild that it's him that ended up getting the scoop on everyone. His wife, Hogan's wife, Sky, she was one of those who tried to downplay it, right? Issuing statements about, a difficult recovery from spinal surgery, while, in the meantime, longtime pal Jimmy Hart posted like this really upbeat update about, he was with Nick at karaoke night and he's doing fantastic, right? But now these rumors have ended in finality. And with Hogan's death comes the closing of one of the most complex and controversial individuals in the history of professional wrestling. Now, I want to point this out here. I have to talk about Hulk Hogan here, but there will be much better eulogies out there that are going to come out in the next couple of days. From Rich and Joe over at the Flagship, Dave over at the on this week's Observer. Those are going to be incredible eulogies that are going to have tons of stories and whatnot. I'm going to skim through some of the details, some of the major plot points, if you will, just so because and while at the same time offering my point of view on it at the same time. So, one thing that we do have to make crystal clear, regardless on where you fall, Hulk Hogan from 1984 to the late 90s was the guy. No one cast a bigger shadow in the business. He wasn't just a wrestling star. He was a pop culture phenomenon. I understand how a lot of more modern fans, let's say younger fans today, all they've been exposed to is shitty Hulk Hogan, shitty, racist, far-right Hulk Hogan, but don't quite understand how much of a phenomenon he truly was. And it's hard, I think, in this day and age to really comprehend that unless you were around, unless you understand a media space where there were 3 television networks. You had radio, you had print newspaper. I don't think people understand how immense, maybe not all people, but I think there's a lot of people who don't understand how immense Hogan was to have broken through like he did as a professional wrestler. Something that back in the day was not unlike today. The stigma still exists where people sort of poo-pooed it and was like, no, this is trash entertainment. It's bottom of the barrel. It's garbage. I think it's fascinating fascinating is not the right word. I think it's remarkable and truly unique that a guy like a pro wrestler, Hulk Hogan, was able to become a cultural touchstone at the time. You could not get away from him. Everyone knew who he was. That's the thing. And even if you didn't watch pro wrestling, you knew who he was. There are people who pretend today that, Roman Reigns is a crossover star, but he isn't, right? He's not when you have like guys like Hulk Hogan who are breaking through. Anyway, this has nothing to do on whether he was, let's say, a good person or not. But there is a stage that has to be set here. And we have to be able to, in pure objective terms, establish that this guy was a hero, was someone that kids looked up to, that parents knew who they were. He had merch everywhere. He, of course, was wrestling, but he had cartoons. He had all sorts of shit breaking into film. It's an important thing to understand. And I don't want to, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to use this to wash away everything that he became, but we have to understand where he started from. And that's why, I guess some of us older guys who talk about him having such a complex history, legacy, I should say. He touched and influenced so many people, particularly of my generation, as just as, let's say, the Power Rangers did to the generation after mine, right? It's a kind of comparison that I think is fair. Again, I'm not saying who was morally better or whatnot. I'm talking as far as pop culture influence. It's really hard to, unless you weren't there, it's really hard to get a full grasp on just how huge he was and how all the scandals afterward ended up chipping away at that veneer, and people then started to see him for what he really was. Because ultimately, right, that dominance came with enormous baggage, right? Backstage politics, the moral scandals, lies, revisionist history. Hulk was very good in that. And a persona that was so entwined between the fiction and the man behind it that the line disappeared entirely. Going back to his roots, right? When he started, he first arrived in the WWF back in 1979 as Sterling Golden. He worked as a heel with Freddie Blassie, was his manager, before being repurposed as Hulk Hogan to appeal, from what I'm told and what I understand, to appeal to the Irish audiences in the Northeast. Hogan got his first taste of Japan in 1980, becoming a major star in New Japan Pro Wrestling, often crediting Antonio Inoki and Vern Gagne for teaching him aspects of how to work a professional wrestling match. Hogan's big break came after a stint in the AWA, boosted by his appearance in Rocky III. That movie role actually got him fired from the WWF in 1981 by Vince McMahon Sr. because Sr. didn't want wrestlers, dabbling in Hollywood. But when Vince Jr. took over, he had an entirely different perspective. He saw dollar signs and brought Hogan back at the end of 1983. So we kind of know the story at this point. It's been told multiple times. On January 23rd, 1984, Hulk Hogan pinned the Iron Sheik at Madison Square Garden and then kicked off the Hulkamania era. From there, he became the face of Vince McMahon's WWF national expansion, gracing the covers of Sports Illustrated, People Magazine, TV Guide, guest starring on Saturday Night Live. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was a brand. The red and yellow, the poses, the, say your prayers, eat your vitamins shtick, all of it created a superhero for a generation of fans. But beneath the surface, it was all, of course, meticulously curated myth-making, right? By 1991, the cracks were showing. The steroid scandal hit the WWF hard, and Hogan was one of the most prominent names linked to Dr. George Zahorian, who was caught distributing steroids to wrestlers. Hogan's infamous appearance on the Arsenio Hall show, to deny it, I should say, was one of the most awkward, transparently false interviews of that entire era. No one believed Hogan, but the machine kept going. He disappeared from the company for a year. When he returned then, after in 1993, wrestling had changed quite a bit. The rock and wrestling era was over, fans had moved on to the new things, and Hogan hadn't. He was still doing the same act in a world that had passed him by. So after an embarrassing loss to Yokozuna at King of the Ring 1993, Hogan quietly finished his WWF run. Of course, the whole steroid trial was intertwined, but we're painting broad strokes here. WCW scooped him up in 1994. And while business saw a short-term bump, his real reinvention came in 1996. That summer, Hogan shocked the world by turning heel and forming the New World Order with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. It was a brilliant move, perhaps the last truly great move of Hogan's career. And it's quite possibly, not only is it quite possibly the last good move he ever did, but it's also it's unquestionably to this day the greatest heel turn to ever exist, because gone was the red and yellow, in its place black, a dyed beard, and a swaggering villain who referred to himself as Hollywood Hogan. It worked. WCW exploded in popularity, and Hogan was once again on top. But as always, success came at a cost. Hogan's power in WCW was vast, maybe too vast. He secured high-paying contracts for himself and his friends, took control of his own creative, and made himself the focus of everything, often to the detriment of the product. Just like in WWF, he refused to do meaningful jobs, constantly kept the spotlight on himself, and manipulated the booking in his favor. WCW, once dominant, was dead by 2001. Of course, Hogan wasn't the only reason, but it did help. After WCW folded, Hogan spent years trying to keep the spotlight. He briefly tried launching his own promotion, the short-lived XWF, for those of you who remember that. Returned to WWE for nostalgia runs and had memorable matches with The Rock, Kurt Angle, and Shawn Michaels, though many of these matches were mired in ego-fueled drama behind the scenes. But by the 2010s, the controversies were no longer just backstage politics. In 2015, audio leaked of Hogan repeatedly using the N-word during a sex tape rant, referring to his daughter's black boyfriend. And it wasn't just one comment either. It was a full-blown racist tirade. More tapes followed on top of that, including a prison call where Hogan told his son Nick that he hoped they wouldn't be reincarnated as black men. WWE cut ties with him immediately, scrubbing Hogan from its Hall of Fame, website, and programming. And even when he was quietly reinstated years later, the public backlash remained. Just recently, in January of this year, 2025, Hogan was loudly booed at WWE's Raw on Netflix debut. Hogan's legacy was no longer just complicated, it was radioactive. On top of the scandals, the power plays, and the backstage manipulation, Hogan may go down as one of the most prolific and pathological liars in the history of professional wrestling. And not just, harmless wrestler exaggerations. These were full-blown, easily disprovable fabrications told over and over again in interviews, on podcasts, and in courtrooms with complete confidence. Let's talk about some of the greatest hits, all right? Hogan claimed he batted a .714 in the Little League World Series, right? Despite no record of him ever playing. He said both Metallica and the Rolling Stones wanted him to be their bassist. He told people he was the original choice for the George Foreman grill, but missed the call and lost the deal. He also claimed multiple times that Elvis Presley was a Hulk Hogan fan, despite the fact that Elvis died in 1977, 2 years before Hogan had his first match. He once said that he wrestled 400 days in a single year. because of time zone changes from flying back and forth to Japan. On the Joe Rogan podcast, he told Joe with a straight face that he fought in Pride, Pride, the MMA promotion in Japan, in the 1970s. Pride was founded in 1997. Can you imagine sitting there, talking to Joe Rogan, MMA historian Joe Rogan, and telling him straight to his face, yeah, I fought in Pride. Come on now. He claimed to have partied with John Belushi after WrestleMania 2. Well, guess what? WrestleMania 2 was in 1986. John Belushi died in 1982. He told interviewers he was scouted in baseball by the Reds and the White Sox, despite there being zero evidence. The rumor, though, goes that Hogan made that up specifically because he wanted to irritate Randy Savage, who actually did play minor league balls for the Reds. There's the infamous Hulkster in Heaven story. I don't know if you know about this one. Hogan released a song in the early 1990s about a young fan, okay? He claimed it was a Make-A-Wish kid in the UK who wanted to see him wrestle at SummerSlam 1992. Hogan said that when he made it to the ring, he noticed that the kid's seat was empty during his match and realized the child had probably died. The only problem with this is that Hulk Hogan didn't wrestle at SummerSlam 1992. He wasn't on the card at all. And let's not forget the testimony in the Gawker trial, which ended up creating some of the most unhinged moments of testimony in the history of U.S. law, I'd say, where Hogan clarified under oath, folks, right? Do not forget this. He clarified that he doesn't have a 10-inch penis. Terry Bollea doesn't, but Hulk Hogan, the character, yeah, he has a 10-inch penis. We're just talking highlights, folks. We're just having a little fun here. We're going down memory lane here a bit. These lies, though fun as they are, weren't accidents or misremembrances. They were part of the brand. Hogan didn't just build a character, he became fiction. The man and the myth became indistinguishable. And he spent decades rewriting his own history in real time. In the last decade, Hogan had one more brief run in TNA where, once again, he became the focal point of a company trying to move forward. Of course, it didn't work. He left in 2013. From there, it was just the mix of scandals, lawsuits, shitty reality TV, and conservative political posturing, right? He aligned himself with Donald Trump, last-ditch effort, the good old right-wing grift, promoted his Real American Beer and pushed a Fox Nation wrestling project called Real American Freestyle Wrestling with his pal Eric Bischoff, though he had to back out of the recent launch due to his poor health, and now he's gone. There's no denying Hogan's impact in pro wrestling. He helped build the WWE into a mainstream juggernaut. He sold out arenas everywhere they went. He revolutionized merchandising. He brought pro wrestling into a completely different era that maybe in retrospect was not for the best. A lot of people will tell you that, oh, well, he was at the forefront and brought wrestling to millions of people across the United States. And there were already millions of people watching wrestling, going live to shows every weekend, some weekdays, and watching it on their local networks and whatnot. Wrestling was thriving before Hulk Hogan, before Vince McMahon, before the WWF. What the WWF did was stomp out the competition and create one promotion, probably to the detriment of professional wrestling in general, right? You can argue that he reached out to people who would have never watched wrestling because of his bigger than life persona. That I can buy into, sure. But he also stunted the careers of countless others, clung to the spotlight long past his expiration date, and left a trail of deception and ugly behavior behind him. He was a master of controlling his narrative until the real story caught up to him. Hulk Hogan was the biggest star wrestling ever produced. That's just observable and quantifiable. He was also one of its most damaging forces too. His legacy isn't one of simple nostalgia or reverence. It's a cautionary tale about ego, unchecked, power, and the dangers of believing your own hype. Terry Bollea is dead, and Hulk Hogan was never real to begin with. Did you hear that Mercedes Mone has won another 2 championships? Excuse me? She flew to Poland and won 2 titles. Let's read this article here. Mercedes Mone defeated Diana Strong at a primetime wrestling event in Koslaw, Portland. Koslaw. That sounds more like it. I pronounce it like coleslaw, and I felt bad, which is why I tried to pronounce it again. Koslaw. Poland. On Sunday, July 27, becoming both the inaugural primetime women's champion and the first Bestia Wrestling women's champion. The match is available for members of Primetime Wrestling's YouTube channel. 2 nights earlier in Wolverhampton, England at Rev Pro's Summer Sizzler, Mone successfully defended her Rev Pro Undisputed British Women's Championship against Sapphire Reed. Mone now carries, all right, are you ready for this? The AEW TBS title, the 2025 Owen Hart Cup belt, the Rev Pro Undisputed British Women's title, the Queen of Southside belt, the CMLL World Women's Championship, European Wrestling Association's Women's title, which she won in Austria in June, and the 2 championships won in Poland. Mone hasn't wrestled in AEW since challenging Toni Storm for the AEW World Championship at All in Texas, and she loves her Poland fans. So, I can't believe, can you believe this? That we are back on some Mercedes Mone discourse because of this. Because people are upset now that she's still winning titles in Poland, in promotions that all of these upset people, promotions that these people have never ever heard of before this event right here. Just because she went out and won these titles. That's right. I can't believe she has Polish creative control either. It's just out of control. These are promotions that no one pays attention to. No one. And the people who get upset about this they never knew that there was even wrestling in Poland. They're probably never heard of it. But now it's a thing. So we're back on this train again. We're back on this train of people being upset that she's winning all these belts. It's funny. It's funny on multiple levels. Here's the first level of funny. Everyone thinking that she's just running in here and asking for the belt, right? Right? As if the promoters don't have a say about this. As if they're having their arm twisted into forcing them to book Mone to win their titles. They are absolutely okay with this. I don't know why anyone doesn't see the logic in this, right? You're a tiny little indie promotion, and coleslaw. Now all I hear is coleslaw. This is ridiculous. You're a tiny little promotion in Koslaw, Poland, and you have legitimate international megastar, wrestling megastar. Mercedes Mone was like, yes, I'll go wrestle for you. I will absolutely do it. And you give them the payday. You give her the payday. It generates tickets. People are like, Hell yeah, we're going to see Mercedes Mone live in my little local indie. Fuck yeah, let's go. And then they're like, well, since you're on the belt collecting gimmick, here you go. Why don't you walk around and parade my fucking title on national television and broadcast all across the United States and in the UK and wherever Max is distributed, right? Parade my championship's title. So then suddenly people have heard of primetime wrestling in Koslau, Poland. I'm pronouncing it another way again. But then now they've heard of primetime wrestling. And then you'll probably have to come back, just like what happened with Rev Pro here. Just like what happened with Rev Pro. She won the title, she came back and defended against Sapphire Reed, and she retained it, and she's gonna come back again. And people are gonna be excited when she gets up against the real challenger who's gonna come and try to take the title away. Because she's gonna have to drop some of these titles. That's the great thing. If she's winning them, but at some point she's going to have to drop them. Now, we've talked about this before. I completely expect her to just vacate some of these belts. She's not going to go back to Poland every other month, or even every month, maybe every other month, but every month or every 2 weeks or whatever to wrestle on the Polish shows. But, the promoter's like, well, we'll get a couple of decent gates out of this. We'll get some new people in here. It's such a basic indie promoter tactic. You get the big star coming in and you have your own talent shine in the meantime, right? That's what you want out of this. So that the people come see the big star, but then they stick around, they see the rest, they see whoever else is there, they watch the rest of the show and they're like, hey, you know what? These people ain't half bad. These people are pretty good. So they stick around for the rest, right? It's kind of basic there. They're like like chat says, having Mercedes Mone being your promotion's inaugural champion is a slam dunk, best advertising you could ever dream for. Like it's only the dumbest people who don't understand this, right? And here's the thing, a promoter who doesn't want Mercedes Mone to win the title doesn't have to invite her. Isn't that special? Isn't that crazy? That the promoter has this complete freedom to do whatever the fuck they want? They can do whatever they want. It's not as if, look, they know what to expect if they bring in Mone. And I don't know why you wouldn't benefit from this. And Mone is not going to your shindy, right? Your little backwater indie to lose a match when she is on an undefeated streak. Well, at least, bear with me. She lost that one match, but she's not going into your little town while she's still doing the belt collector gimmick to start losing matches. She's going to go in there and win. And you're going to want her to win your championship, get some buzz for your promotion. So when she comes back, people get even more excited and you draw more people. I don't know how difficult this is to understand for some people. Plus, on top of that, so that was the first funny layer. That was the first ha-ha. That was the first ha-ha funny layer. The second funny ha-ha layer is a little bit of racism and a little bit of misogyny can go a long way. There's a little bit of both here. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that here going. Like, I don't remember anyone bitching when Kenny Omega was going around doing a belt collector gimmick. Now, granted, he didn't have as much gold as Mercedes is walking around with, but nonetheless, no one was saying Kenny has to stop winning titles here. I think there were even a contingent of people who were like, he should win more. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's do a good old fashioned belt collector gimmick. I don't remember anyone getting upset about that. Just saying. But I think on the next layer of funny here, the other funny layer here is, and we talked about it a few weeks ago, but it bears being repeated. I think people just don't understand what a pushed star looks like anymore. And that is entirely due to Vince. This is entirely due to Vince McMahon with his 50-50 booking and everyone getting a shot, especially when it comes to the women's division, where everyone gets a turn. Now you've got someone, a woman, who is 100% dominant, who is a true to form superstar, who is going around collecting all this gold and being pushed like a superstar. No one knows how to deal with this because they've never seen this. Because in the past 2 decades, they've only seen one way of doing things, Vince's way. And I got to tell you, 50-50 booking, no good. It never serves anyone. No one wins, no one loses. Everything just stays as is. There's no stars that are made. No one gets forward. But now Mercedes, with the push that she's getting in her company and everywhere else that is supportive of this as well, she's just winning and winning and winning. And people don't know how to deal with this. Now they feel like she's, right, Mercedes Hogan, right? When in reality, this is what a star push looks like. This is what it looks like. This is exactly what it looks like. We're not used to seeing that. Again, especially when it comes to the women, because the way Vince booked his women's division for years and years and years was everyone gets a fucking turn. You really had to be the absolute dregs of the division to not end up with the SmackDown women's title at some point. You really had to be like the shits to not get your turn with the title. I legitimately think it's a combination. These are the 3 things that make this incredibly funny. The 3 layers of laughs I'm getting out of this. A little bit of everything. People don't understanding that the promoters are also behind this, that they're okay with this, that they're not being forced into a corner. It's not as if they're booking Mercedes Mone blind and then she's showing up and suddenly, oh, I can't lose. And so they know exactly this was all negotiated and prepared before she flew in. You know, I know that a lot of times on the indie circuit, most of the time, the guys show up. It's like, okay, boss, they go up to the promoter and say, okay, boss, what do you need me for tonight? What am I doing? Most of the time. But there's always exceptions, especially when you're bringing in top tier stars. Usually this shit is negotiated beforehand. And do you think prime time wrestling from Poland, Kozłów Proman, Poland, do you think they're gonna make a hit? They're gonna start having hissy fits and start calling up Tony Khan or Rocky Romero or whoever the fuck, saying, no, your girl doesn't want to do a job. No, that's not. And then they're going to get upset and somehow this all blows up in their face. No, that's not how this works. That's Fantasyland. Primetime wrestling from Kozłów Poland. Again, another way to pronounce it. They had settled at least the big picture stuff with AEW before flying Mercedes Mone out there. That's 100% for sure how it went down. And then, a couple of women haters out there, a couple of racists out there, don't like this kind of thing where people that don't look like them are in power, feel empowered, look strong. That's right. That comes and gets you. It comes and gets you in the Andrew Tates. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not supposed to be this way. And then at the foundation of it all is people just don't understanding how fucking superstars are made, how stars are supposed to look, and how they're supposed to be booked. You put all of those wonderful combinations together, and you have this discourse that pops up again. And it's going to keep popping up as long as she keeps winning titles. And look, here's another thing. Here, real quickly here. Let's go back to the article, okay? They have the list here. Mone, the titles that Mone carries, okay? AEW TBS title. That's a legitimate title. The 2025 Owen Hart Cup belt. She is the first wrestler in AEW's history to carry this title, right, outside of the night after the tournament where they're celebrating with it in the ring, right? Adam Page, gave it away. He's like, all right, here you go. He's like, I'm good. Adam Cole and Britt Baker, when they won it that one year, they came out one time, happy couple, waved to the crowd, gave everyone a smooch, and you never saw those titles for the rest of the year. Like Ricky Starks, same thing. Willow, they just had it that one time and that was it. We know why Mercedes is doing this. She's doing it because she wants to walk around with all of her trophies, all of her gold, but she's not defending that title. You know what I mean? Like, this is like a cup. It's instead of holding a cup, she has a belt, but it's the same thing. Like, it's not a championship title. It's a cup. It's a medal. It's a diploma. It's an award you got because you were the best in this one tournament, but she's not defending it. It's for show. But we understand why she's doing it, because she's a heel and she wants to spread out as much as possible and say, oh, look at all these titles that have. That's not a title. It's a prize, but it's not a title. There's a nuance there. Rev Pro Undisputed British Women's title. Sure. Queen of Southside belt. As far as I understand, that title's been retired. As far as I understand, the British Women's title and the Queen of Southside belt are defended at the same time. That's one thing. That's one title. So again, like, we know why she's doing this. Because she's a heel. Then the CMLL World Women's Championship, that's legit. The European Wrestling Association Women's title, that's also legit. And then these two titles, again, the Bestia Wrestling Women's Championship. I don't understand what that is. What does that even mean? She's the inaugural primetime wrestling women's champion and the inaugural Bestia Wrestling Women's Champion. Are these two different promotions? What is this? Anyway, like, there's my point being is that there's two titles that she's carrying right now that aren't even one of them's not even a championship title that you defend, and the other one has been retired. And she's just running around to show off all the gold that she has. She's got to get a bigger carry-on now. Well, she can't get a bigger carry-on because there's a limit on carry-ons, right, on the size. Anyway. Why don't we delve a little bit into some CMLL, some AEW. A little bit of older news, but again, I haven't been around, and I want to be able to talk about this because we had already been talking about this. So I want to be able to I got to come full circle on this. On a recent update on Lucha Blog, here, let me pull it. It's on the July 18, 2025 edition of Lucha Blog. Cubs fan goes over the rumors that were going around that Hechicero had signed a dual contract with AEW and CMLL. And let's talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to read directly the news here from the horse's mouth here, the horse being Cubs fan. I'm not calling Cubs fan an actual horse. Thursday, in the AEW official, by the way, not actually official, Reddit forum, a user posted that Hechicero had signed an AEW contract. That user appears to have some valuable contacts in AEW based on previous reports, and I believe he's correct on this story as well. Multiple people had told me that Hechicero was going to sign with AEW. The target was to be done the same week as Grand Slam Mexico, but there was a holdup. I'm unsure why it was delayed. I prefer not to comment on these situations until the deal is finalized. Based on that report, the deal appears to be finalized. I believe Hechicero's contract with AEW would allow him to continue working with CMLL. I'm sure it was signed with CMLL's blessing. So that's very interesting. Let's continue here. There's been unhappiness in the NJPW fandom about their wrestlers signing with AEW. There's already some trepidation from CMLL fans about this Hechicero signing with AEW for similar reasons. I'm not concerned. This contract, as I understand it, allows him to continue to both work CMLL and AEW. It is not a full-time move similar to Okada or Ospreay. It's a lot easier to dip in and out of CMLL than it is New Japan Pro Wrestling. Wrestlers don't feel like part of the New Japan promotion if they're working selected shows instead of full tours. Everyone in CMLL is in and out on some shows and off some shows. Let me read that again. That was weird. That was strange, right? Everyone in CMLL is in and out on some shows and off some shows. Some people disappear for weeks at a time with no acknowledgement. Hechicero is also like most CMLL wrestlers, where they have a feud for a while, but spend a lot of time wrestling miscellaneous matches. It's not going to disrupt CMLL if Hechicero has to miss shows. The travel between US and Mexico is shorter and without the big time difference. The big shows of AEW's week are currently on Wednesday and Saturday, and the big show of CMLL's week is Friday, so there's no massive conflict. So I thought that was fascinating, and it's something that we had talked about here, right? Right here, weeks ago on these very streams, this very podcast. We talked about the idea of CMLL guys coming together with AEW, with CMLL and AEW, I should say, coming together to sign guys to double contracts, kind of like what AEW has done with Konosuke Takeshita, with Kevin Knight, and we saw this as probably as very likely a very positive thing, mostly because, look, as we mentioned weeks ago, this was probably the best way for CMLL to combat the upcoming poaching of talent from TKO / WWE / AAA. It's coming. And, I've been talking about it for a while, and we have to just deal with this reality. Don't close your eyes and pretend it's not going to happen. At some point, particularly, I'm assuming, particularly once the AAA deal is officialized with TKO, they're going to come after CMLL talent. And like we mentioned, CMLL does not have the funds to provide proper counteroffers to whatever money TKO is going to be offering the CMLL guys. So they are at a risk to lose some guys to the other company. And when we started hearing about, then we started talking about the potential maybe for dual contracts, and we had talked about how this will probably be CMLL's best way to hang on to its talent, even though they have to share it with another promotion. I think it's ultimately better to strike this kind of deal with a partner promotion and then allow that partner promotion to use that talent, use your talent as well, as opposed to losing that talent completely and not having access to them, period. Right? Because if Hechicero were to go to AAA, he's no longer working CMLL. Like that's just how it's going to be. It's going to be a complete and utter shutdown. So I saw this go down while I was on vacation, and I wondered why it wasn't bigger news. Like, I think this is legitimately some of the biggest news to come out of pro wrestling in July, is this thing that is the idea that AEW and CMLL are hunkering down, or at least hunker down in the case of Hechicero, to give him a double contract so he can work both places. And that's the precedent. There are going to be others. Like that was my immediate thought, is like, okay, well, there are going to be other people who are going to follow suit here. AEW is going to use this experience and extend offers to other guys, and probably, other guys that we've been seeing recently on television, and on AEW television specifically. Hechicero had been, he had popped in and out of AEW TV, in the past, showing up every few months or so. But recently he had been on, it seems like every week. every week he's either been on Dynamite or Collision or both. So you kind of felt that there was something there where you're like, well, you know, Tony Khan must really like Hechicero, but there's got to be a little more to this. And then challenging Bandito for the Ring of Honor Championship, and I'm like, okay, there's something here. There's absolutely something here, and there you go. We get the news that he's got the double contract. So, like, this is overall, ultimately, this is really good news. If you're a CMLL fan and you're afraid that CMLL is going to lose all of this great talent because they won't be able to match what TKO is offering, right? These thoughts, this speculation was only reinforced again on Lucha Blog on yesterday's edition of or yesterday's post on Lucha Blog, where Cubs gave us a little more insight here. Talking about a Twitter user, Dr. Landrew, who is a Mexican lucha Twitter account, who responded to the Hechicero story. He said this: as I understand it, it's not just Hechicero who signed, but also some other wrestlers have or will have a shared contract, not a shared account. That just creates legal issues, especially if the shared account is with your mother. But also have other wrestlers who have or will have a shared contract between CMLL and AEW. So that was very interesting. Cubs continues. Following the Stephanie Vaquer affair, a report, I believe was from Fightful, stated that AEW and its partners were working to prevent the same thing from happening again. It appears they've been doing that work. So that's very interesting. So we're already getting rumors that it's not just Hechicero that is being singled out here. In fact, I have some speculation, but there's something interesting here. Over the past couple of days, Mascara Dorada was asked about his match with Bandito on this week's CMLL media session. He put over Bandito strongly and discussed wanting a rematch of him in the US. Dorada was asked about what Bandito said after the match and if he'd go to AEW. Dorada shut down the idea strongly, said he's very happy in CMLL. He feels they gave him big opportunity when he had done nothing outside to deserve that, and that means a lot to him. His mother and father have always preached the importance of loyalty, and CMLL has always been loyal to him, and Dorada is equally loyal to CMLL. Now, this is again, some great news to hear in that respect, but there's nothing here keeping a guy like Mascara Dorada from jumping on the train here and getting his own dual contract with AEW. He doesn't leave CMLL, which clearly, from what he said here, he feels very indebted to, feels a strong sense of loyalty to. So, and I can dig that, right? But he won't leave the company strictly for AEW. He's not going to do that. But given the opportunity to be able to work both places, and seeing how Mascara Dorada has been on AEW television quite a bit over the past couple of months as well, maybe not as frequently as Hechicero, but he's been on TV quite a bit. I'm thinking this is a guy who might have benefited from one of these dual contracts. You want to start the speculation train, folks? You want to get on board? Choo choo. Here we go. I would say that on top of, if they're trying to lock down Dorada, a guy who is perceived as the future of CMLL, right? Might as well do what you need to do to hang on to the present of CMLL and lock down Místico as well. Why not try to do that? Místico's been on AEW television and in prominent spots on top of that. Not just like, scumming it on the mid card. He is mid-carding, but, not in a scum place. He's feuding with MJF, who is one of the top guys of the company, in a feud that's, dribbling over into MLW on top of that, including both wrestlers' home promotions. There's a lot of stuff here going on. There's a lot of very interesting things going on here. Having him feud with MJF, purchasing the rights to his theme song so that he could have this grandiose entrance in Arena Mexico. Working to get a really cool spot on in the gauntlet match and all that. Like, you could tell that either they have something already canned, or there was a little sweetening of the pot here. It's like, look, we'll take care of you. This is what we'll do with you. And I can understand, Mystico still worried about how he'd be treated on American television, considering what happened last time. And would he readily go back to WWE to begin with, considering what happened last time? Look, it's been a long while since Sin Cara, right? How much water has run under the bridge? I don't know. We have a tendency to give a lot of grief to WWE for what happened, but it's not just WWE that was the issue here. There was, Mystico sort of, he was an architect of his own demise as well. They built that house together. Is he ready maybe to put a little more, to eat a little more humble pie here? I don't know. Look, I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a lot of things that could still happen. But I think it's fair to say that CMLL and AEW are probably working very, very, very hard to lock down Mystico so that he doesn't go to AAA. He's Mexico's biggest wrestling star. He is the biggest lucha libre star in all of Mexico. WWE, AAA wouldn't even be, WWE doesn't care necessarily about needing to do something with him. They just don't want the other guys to have him. It's one of those. We're going back to some old-timey Vince ways of doing things, where you want to stock up on everyone because you want to starve out the competition, right? That's essentially what he wanted to do. But I think that's inevitable. With Hechicero getting a contract, I think we're going to see more CMLL guys getting spots. I think a guy like Atlantis Jr. will also be a benefit of this. Atlantis Jr. was the Ring of Honor TV champion just very recently. Tony seems to like him. He's talented. He's a good he's a good pro wrestler. I would absolutely bring him in. Another guy that I personally would bend myself over. I know I can do that, but bend over backwards is what I tried to say, to lock down and sign is Sandokan Jr. Because that's a guy that AAA and WWE would absolutely love to have, because he's got the size and he's got that immediate charisma. That's the kind of guy that they look at and go, oh yeah. Much more than, they look at a guy like Star Jr., they go, next. They're not looking at Neon smacking their lips, even though Neon is a tremendous pro wrestler. WWE's not looking at Neon rubbing their hands together going, here's our next big thing. But a guy like Sandokan Jr., absolutely he could. I think he's 100% on their radar. He has to be. So that's another guy I'd lock down. I think that's the core of your future for CMLL. And if AEW can benefit and help out a partner in hanging on to their stars by entering these dual contracts, I think that would be a good idea. And then that becomes a bargaining chip for AEW as well. That becomes a bargaining chip. it gives them a little more power in a sense where they can go to a wrestler and say, hey, listen, we can sign you and you can still hold on to your dates in your home promotion. You don't have to, cut everything off. You don't have to sever the bridge. You can, or sever the connection at the very least. You can still hang out with them and work with us. And I think that's a big deal. I think there are more wrestlers out there who might be interested in that kind of scenario as opposed to, leaving everything behind and pulling a Stephanie Vaquer, which again, we need to remind everyone, she did not do things the right way with CMLL, and she is persona non grata with them right now. They've erased her from history. They took down her banner in Arena Coliseo. She doesn't exist for them anymore. She went all in on her WWE dream. Good for her. But, at least now people don't feel they'll have to do that they will have some leverage here to move forward. And, at the same time, there's AEW still remains open for its talent to go wrestle in other places and whatnot. So, this talent could also benefit from working certain select indies as well, Japan is also an opportunity. See, there's a lot of good stuff here. But like Cubs pointed out, I think one of the most interesting points here is that working from the United States to Mexico is much less intensive than working from the United States to Japan. So you can hop back and forth much more easily. I'm not saying like it's a breeze. It's not like, crossing the street or whatever, but it's easier. It's easier to grab a flight and make your date on time without having to leave like 2 days in advance and then rest a day to readjust your internal clock kind of thing. That's the type of situation that you do have to live with when it comes to jumping around from North America to Japan. So it's very beneficial. And I'm glad to hear that there might be other people that are about to sign these dual contracts or have already. I think it's going to be very, very, very beneficial. And again, something that we've not really seen in modern times in professional wrestling. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out and comes together. It's hard to see the negatives as it stands right now. It's hard to see the negatives, but they'll probably rear their ugly head down the road somewhere. Very likely. New Japan Pro Wrestling's G1 Climax 35 is underway. It's started, it's going, it's happening right now, and we're going to talk about it a little bit because I'm not doing daily audio this year. For the past couple of years, I've been doing that here on the podcast, watching every day, hopping on the old recording machine, and then pumping out some pithy but also not very pithy thoughts about the daily happenings in the G1. And if you've been hanging around the streams over the past few weeks and whatnot, it's something that I was wondering, will I get into it? Because, as many of you know, I went to the United States, I had a bit of a vacation and so on and so forth. And I was like, well, okay, maybe when I get back, I'll be able to jump right back in to the daily audio and start doing that. Turns out, wasn't really by the time I got around to being able to commit to watching the G1, we were already 5 nights in. And I was like, what am I going to do now? Am I going to sit down and recap the last 5 nights and then, do the daily? It didn't feel conducive to do it. It didn't feel natural. It felt weird. And I don't like doing things that feel weird. That might come off as weird, but at least it doesn't feel weird. And it was, for me, this started to feel weird. So instead, I have decided that for the duration of the G1 Climax 35, I will be doing weekly updates right here on the podcast. We'll go over, all the happenings that occurred over the past week and give you some big picture thoughts, maybe some granular ones in between, some match recommendations on top of that. yeah, just just a little segment here to keep us fresh because it is the biggest pro wrestling tournament of the year, and I think it's deserving of the attention, of all the attention, especially since I've been covering it for the past few years in detail. It felt kind of weird to not do anything, but it also felt weird to get back. Look, anyway, yeah, I think I found the proper balance. Here. If you have any issues with that, send an email to MrWarrenHayes.contact@gmail.com or don't, like it doesn't matter. This is still what I'm going to do. But but if you do have an issue, yeah, of course, I'm interested to hear about it, but it's probably not going to change my mind. Look, we are going to talk about nights 1 through 7 that have happened and are in the books, July 19 to 27. That's the entire period that we will be covering here on today's podcast. And look, before we start getting into the nuts and bolts themselves, there's the G1, right, is it is what it is, and I think everyone has sort of come around on this, but the G1 Climax is no longer the tournament that it once was, in that golden era of the 2010s over there in New Japan, where you had the likes of, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Kazuchika Okada, Tetsuya Naito, Katsuyori Shibata, you had Prime Ishii on top of that, and everyone was just going out there giving maximum effort and having these great fucking matches. That's something I think at this point, it's been a talking point over the past few years, over the past couple of years. But I think this year, as opposed to it being a talking point where it's we all have to come around and accept that this is no longer this tournament anymore. I think we've finally come full circle. I think all New Japan fans have finally divested themselves of the past and leave that lingering nostalgia behind. Those I think the glory days of the G1 are dead and buried until we get a crop of guys who will prove us wrong. Unfortunately, I still don't. We'll talk about that in a second, but I don't think this is the crop of guys yet. The G1s, the recent ones, especially since I've been covering them, which is it a coincidence? Conspiracy maybe, but especially since I've been covering them, there's a clear lack of urgency that exists now in the G1. It doesn't feel as big or huge. You're not throwing out star ratings, 4 or 5 star matches. You're not throwing out all the ratings like you're seasoning your favorite spaghetti sauce. There's no star-making moments anymore. The G1 has changed into something else, and that something else is this. It's essentially the same vibe of tournament that we've been having for the past few years at this point. Whereas the vibes, 2012, 2013, 14, 15, 16, let's, just pick a year. The vibes were completely different. Then you're let's see some people tear ass. Let's see some things get absolutely bonkers out of control, right? It's not that promotion anymore. We just don't do that anymore in the G1. And I think most New Japan fans have come to live with it. I think they accept it. I think we've let go of what used to be. And you had to, because the stars who made up that era are no longer there. The stars that carried these great G1s, they're just not there anymore. So then the question is, well, where are the stars of today, right? And I think that for easily the 3rd year in a row, maybe even the 4th year in a row, we are wondering as fans, who is going to be the next major star of New Japan Pro Wrestling? And we always turn to the G1. to get some kind of semblance, an inkling as to who is going to be the guy. And I legitimately think the last time that the G1 booking was extremely clear on who was going to be the guy and who was going to be pushed to be the guy was Sonata. And he already was the guy. He already was the champion. And it was what, like 3 years ago? I think so. When he was locked into that one block with all of the young guys, and he ran through all of them. Right? And look at how that turned out. Like, history being 2020, etc., right? But we're still in this same position. We're still here wondering, who is going to be the guy? And it's been, how long has it been now since we started the talk about the Reiwa 3? Isn't it 3 years now? Aren't we third year into this? And some of these guys, they've been a little more, maybe 4, if you consider the tenure that they started to have. But the Reiwa 3, right? That was the thing like from about 3 years ago. Yota Tsuji, Ren Narita, Shota Umino. And then it started to expand. Then then Yuya Yumera came back from excursion. Then Ryohei Oiwa came back from excursion. Then Gabe Kidd sort of, took the bull by the horns. He's the only guy who decided to make an opportunity who decided to, as certain people like to say, he grabbed the situation by the throat and decided to make it his own. Regardless of what the plans were for him, he sort of ended up making himself, undeniable to a degree. All these guys coming together, and we're like, look, here is finally the crop of guys who are going to be able to replace all of these wrestlers who are leaving, who are retiring, or who just physically are so shot they can't go anymore. Here they are, and yet none of them are coming across as the undeniable force that will lead this company. Which one of these guys is the star, like the undeniable star that you can close your eyes, blindly throw into a Tokyo Dome main event and be like, my job here is done. We're going to draw, and it's going to be a great match on top of that. There's no one. New Japan has not built an ace for this company, much less a crop of guys for that ace to engage with. They're trying, they're trying to do things, but it's not working out. And I don't know what the issue is. We talk about because much saliva and ink and bandwidth has been spent trying to understand why Shota Umino is not taking off, why he is the way he is ultimately, why he just can't seem to connect, why he seems completely disinterested in what he's doing. Yet he's the guy. He seems to be the golden guy because he's the first of that crop who got the main event in the Tokyo Dome this year. And he was outright rejected by the fans. The fans watching at home, but also the fans in the building. They were not into it. Not exactly a big drawing main event. And you'd think that with all the guys that they have that they can fall back on, there would be one that they could just pivot to, that they could flip to. Yota Tsuji, okay, let's get him out of the way. Yota is, I like to, if you've listened to my stuff for a while, you know how I refer to him as a vibes guy. Because, he comes into the ring, he's got a great look, a great presentation. He's connected with the audience. We've talked about this for a while. But in the ring, we're still looking for that click, that spark, that something that will put him over where you're like, this guy goes into the ring and has great matches. So I started making, I started calling him a vibes guy, which there's nothing wrong with, but once in a while he's going to have, he'll pull out a great match, right? Once in a while, he'll have a great one, but he's not like this consistently high-level worker. But he clearly has the most charisma out of the bunch here. Why aren't we pivoting more heavily to him? Maybe we are in the course of this G1, but I'm not quite seeing it yet. I'm not quite there yet. But we're insisting on Umino. We're like, even right now, even when Shota Umino, even when Shota Umino was clearly put in a spot with the hair versus hair match that he had against Great Khan, I believe, if I remember correctly, which was meant to be as a punishment for not living up to expectations, for dragging his feet, for being who everyone thought that, we're going to have a reimagining. Maybe we're going to have him in a spot where he's going to feel like a fire is lit and he's going to have to fight his way back. And maybe that's the spark that's needed for him to get over. Not happening. In fact, he's right back to where he was, except he doesn't come through the audience and he's not shaking glow sticks. That other than that, it's the same Shota Umino. Is he going to be a heel? No, he's not going to be a heel either. He's not going to be a bad guy. Essentially, nothing has changed. His hair is even growing back. Like, nothing has changed. He's continuously put in top spots. So it's you really do wonder what is going on with the booking in New Japan, where no one sees this and no one is deciding to pivot. Now, I know that Gedo is a long-term kind of guy, right? And he's one of these guys that will book something and it will seem mysterious and out of place. It won't make sense. The next thing you know, when it all comes together, you're like, now I see where we're going. But I'm having trouble connecting with that vision because it's not making any sense, especially now in this environment with the G1 where they are not drawing big houses. In fact, they are, in certain circumstances, they are drawing terrible houses. They drew a terrible house at the Oda City Gym a couple of days ago. So what are we waiting for? What is the thing that we're waiting for that the biggest promotion in Japan cannot reignite itself? Not even Hiroshi Tanahashi right now in his farewell tour, his final G1, not even him is able to pack the houses. So what signal is the booking committee, the booking group, Gedo, however you want to approach it, what are they waiting for to just pull the trigger on something and try out something new? Try out something new. Because we're still dependent on Tanahashi as a draw. And he's not working out. And something new. You want to talk about something new? House of Torture doing the Bullet Club shtick. That's been around for how 20 years at this point? 15, 20? Still the same things. Still the same shtick. This is supposed to be fresh and reinvigorating and exciting. Let me tell you, it's not. It's not exciting. It's the opposite. It's frustrating. And it sort of trickles down a little bit because then I start to think, right? These new guys, these young, hungry dudes, right? Who spent years upon years eating shit in the dojo, right? You'd think that once they get back from excursion and they figured something out, they just want to jump right in and shake the cage and show what they can do, right? You'd think that they'd be more willing to put themselves out there. If the booking doesn't want to take risks with you, well, you would assume that regardless of your match placement, you'd want to tear the house down, right? You'd want to, as a young guy, you want to come in, you want to stand out, You want to be the next Tanahashi, the next Okada, the next Naito. You want to be the next guy up, you know? Well, the best way to do it is to go in there and have terrific matches and create a solid crowd connection with the audience and just go all in. You know, kind of like Gabe Kidd, what he did, right? I'd say he's the only one who's really done that. But you got a whole slew of other guys who can do that. And so I have to wonder if the wrestlers may be playing it safe due to directives from the creative, from booking, which are told, hey, you can't go in there. You can't go in there and rock the boat. You're the third match on the card. You can't rock the boat higher than the main event. You know, and I'm like, what is this bullshit? Like, yeah, and these guys, these young guys, you know, they don't have they're new, so they don't have the political backbone to be like, well, fuck this shit. You know, I'm gonna do it anyway or whatever. You know, I'm just wondering if there isn't a directive that's in place where it's like that these guys follow to a T. So then when it's time for them to deliver on, you know, big time matches, when they're in the main event of a G1 night or in the semi-main event, then the connection isn't as solid or as good because they haven't been tearing it up all throughout the tournament, regardless of where they've been, if that makes sense. Like at some point, I can't imagine that all of that Shota Umino, Yota Tsuji, Yuya Uemura, Ryohei Oiwa, Gabe Kidd, let's throw Ren Narita in there. Like, that's 6 guys. And all of them are like, no, I'm going to take it easy. That not one of them is there going, oh, I'm just going to tear this shit up. I'm just going to go all in on it. I'm just going to go for it. You can argue right now that Konosuke Takeshita is probably, you know, he's in a good spot. He's been having fantastic matches because, you know, it's Konosuke Takeshita and he's probably going to be Wrestler of the Year as far as I'm concerned. And no, do you think anyone is telling Takeshita to tone it down? No, of course not. No one's telling him to tone it down. Do you think they're telling their talent, you know, the other guys to tone it down because Takeshita needs to shine? Well, maybe, and if so, that's dumb. Because let's assume this is the directive, right? Let's say Takeshita has free reign, but everyone else, if you're on the card with Takeshita, keep it tranquil. Well, you're not helping Takeshita in the long run because in the meantime, you're not building up exciting challenges for Konosuke Takeshita if he does win the G1 and if he does win, you know, in the Tokyo Dome at Wrestle Kingdom this year, which seems to be, well, next year, 2026. You know what I'm talking about. Because, you know, there seems to be a lot of talk. You know, a lot of people going, well, maybe do that, right? Anyway, discussion for another time. A lot of speculation there, and it's a discussion for another time. You're not going to help him you're not going to help him in the long run if he does become IWGP World Champion and he's got no one to fight. Or all his challengers are all very milquetoast. He's just like, Hiroshi Tanahashi's not going to be there to wrestle anymore. He's going to be retired at that point. There's this lack of internal, I feel like there's this lack of internal competition that fails to create the urgency. There's the word again. That fails to create the urgency with these G1 shows that was a trademark of the great G1s of the past, where where every 2 points feels crucial. You know, commentary, Walker Stewart, Chris Charlton, who do a fantastic job, by the way. They will tell you on occasion, oh, those 2 points, they're crucial no matter what, you know. But why don't they feel crucial? Because they don't. They don't feel like that. And I really feel like these guys, all of these up and comers, they're not they're not jockeying against each other, which was the case back in the day with Okada and Tanahashi and Naito. And do you think they all were like buddy pals and, hugged it, sing kumbaya after their matches? These were all guys, these were all top ego. And then, look, you can even throw Kenny Omega into that at some point. These are guys that had huge egos who were all like positioned to be, at the top of the card, and they all wanted the big spots. They weren't jockeying against each other. They'd see one guy go out and have a great match, and then they'd come back and they'd say, well, they'd see them come back, and then then be like, well, shit, we got to outdo these guys now. And I'm not feeling that. I haven't been feeling that for years. And it's wild to me that we're still not feeling it now, because we're in a position where there are no more old guys to carry the company. There's no more Naito. There's no more Okada. There won't be any more Tanahashi at the end of the year. So why aren't these guys like devouring the scenery? And here's something else. New Japan's got Aaron Wolf coming in on January 4th next year. Aaron Wolf, they're banking heavily on him, right? Charismatic, judo champion, Olympic star, mainstream appeal, naturally charismatic. He's starting up at Wrestle Kingdom. And his potential success, if this guy can wrestle, because we don't know yet, he's training. That's all we know. But if this guy is able to pick up wrestling and be even remotely good at it, he is going to overtake all of these dudes. He's going to outshine the Shota Uminos and the Yuyas and the Ryoheis. They need to step up. New Japan needs to give them the free rein to allow them to step up. I don't know I don't know what they need, but I failed to believe that these young guys are just like, playing along, and I failed to believe that they're being told, go out there and have a great match, and the guys are there and like, sure. And they're not, and they're not taking risks. I failed to believe that. I don't think that's a thing. I think the receiving, I really have this deep down, deep in my gut, and I trust my gut quite often. Deep down in my gut, I feel like there's a situation where these young guys are being overproduced and not being given the opportunities to go all out and flex everything they got every night they're out there. Is it because they're afraid of getting injured? Is it because the office is afraid that they're going to get injured? Maybe. I don't know. But with Aaron Wolf coming around, it's a warning sign to these guys. It has to be. There's not one of these young guys that has to be excited about that. That means one of them is losing a spot, and a top spot on top of that. It's a lot of tops. Look, I don't know why they haven't. Look, they've been grooming, and in the positive sense, they've been grooming guys like Tsuji and Yumera and Umino and the rest. Look, I've said their names so often here. They've been taking care and grooming them into stars, yet none of them have achieved that star status. Shota Umino is a star in name only. Yoda has the stuff. But where's his next gear? Maybe he doesn't have a next gear. And if that's the case, well, maybe he's not your guy. The company seems unable to go all in, unable or unwilling to go all in on one guy and at the very least create an ace. And then I feel like you get your ace, or maybe they think it's Shota Umino. Maybe they think they're doing a really good job. Tell you what, audience attendance will tell you otherwise, that maybe you're not doing a good job. But there's no one like that's undeniable. No one's being pushed to the top. There's no one to protect either. You're not protecting Okada's spot or Naito's spot or Tanahashi's spot. There's no top guy left to protect. It's like, that's what makes this whole situation so fascinating. Let the young guys steal the show. Let this G1 be their G1. Show us that you're not restricting performances. The directive, if there's one directive that these guys should be having, is regardless of your spot on the show, go out there and steal it. Hey, let's throw Bolton Oleg in here. I've been forgetting Bolton Oleg, but there's another guy, and they're so fucking close with him too. They're so close. To the thing with this G1 here, and I mean this, I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but I legitimately do mean this. I believe this is not just another slow year, that it's not just another G1 year. This is a critical year for New Japan for creating the next crop of guys that will carry this company for the next decade. And I've been saying this for the past 3 years, but it hasn't been. But back then when we were saying it, I'd get countered with, yeah, but listen, Naito's still there, Okada's fine, Ospreay's there. They're all gone. They're all gone. They're not there anymore. It's literally a trapeze act without a net right now. And they don't want any of the trapeze acts to do any spectacular moves in case they get hurt, because there's no more net. Yet, I'm sure these trapeze guys would love to get out there and wow the crowd. It's just not happening right now. And it is infuriating. So how's that for an initial big picture, for an initial big peak, I'll say the words, big picture thought of the G1 so far. Let's talk about the standings. How about that? Let's do that for our two blocks here. Block A right now is dominated by Yota Tsuji at the top with 8 points. We've got 5 guys with 6 points, being Yuya Uemura, Bolton Oleg, Evil, and Ryohei Oiwa. That's 4 people. I am legitimately terrible at math. I have the numbers like right in front of me and I can still fuck up. At 4 points, Callum Newman, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Sanada, and Taichi, and David Finlay rounding out the bottom at 2 points. David Finlay, right now, anyway, the story that commentary is saying when it comes to David Finlay is that he's insecure. He's asking himself, where am I going to fall on the list of great Bullet Club leaders if I can't win a G1? And that's fair. And he's not doing good so far. At 2 points like that, when we're hitting the midway point, just in a couple of days, we're hitting the midway point of the tournament. No, this is not looking good. I still don't believe that Finlay is going to be bringing up the rear. I kind of feel he's going to get a sudden surge. I wouldn't be surprised if David Finlay doesn't lose any of his next matches and qualifies for, at the very least, the playoffs. Not necessarily winning, but qualifying for the playoffs. At this point, Yota Tsuji kind of feels like a shoe-in, but you never know look, this booking, man, it's something else to try and figure out. So I wouldn't be, I'm not throwing any possibilities out, but you kind of get the impression that Yota Tsuji is going to be a shoe-in to qualify. Anyway, it's still a little too early to really get into it and break down scenarios. Besides, there's 3 guys per block who advance. So it opens up the possibilities a lot more. We're not going to be necessarily, we're not necessarily going to be eliminating people beforehand. Now, David Finlay, here's the interesting thing. With his 2 points is that most of his upcoming matches still have to do, most of his upcoming matches are with some of the top guys in the block. You've got Evil coming up. You've got Yota Tsuji coming up, Uemura coming up. These are top guys, Bolton Oleg. So either they are positioning. So obviously, first of all, if he wins, it's 8 points. It goes up to 10. 10 is a reasonable number to qualify, and you kind of get the impression that the guys that he has left in his tournament are all dudes who also can potentially qualify, you know? So I could see him picking up all the tiebreakers on all these dudes, which would secure him, you know, maybe with a Bolton Oleg, let's say, who finishes with 10 points as well. But maybe Finley will have the tiebreaker and he'll be able to move on. That type of stuff. I think Finley's qualifying, and I think he's winning his next 4 matches, and these are going to be crucial tiebreakers that he's going to get, and he'll be able to move forward. Yeah, I would be shocked if David Finley doesn't move on to the playoffs. Like I totally shocked. As far as Block B goes, Yoshihashi and Ren Narita, Jesus fucking Christ, are at the top with 8 points apiece. You want to talk about some bracket busting? Yoshihashi and Ren Narita up at the top with 8 points. Bizarro world, brother. Jula Maloney, Shota Umino, and Konosuke Takeshita and Great Khan come up next with 6 points. Zack Sabre Jr. and El Phantasmo both have 4 points. Then Shingo Takagi brings up the rear with 2. Gabe Kidd, of course, was in Block B, but unfortunately, Kidd was sent home packing. That's probably one of the biggest stories of the tournament so far. He wrestled on night 1 against Takeshita, which was a really good match, unsurprisingly. And he ended up hyperextending his knee. He came out on night 2 on crutches, announcing that his knee had been hyperextended, but he was forfeiting that match, but not his tournament yet, because he still wanted time to get back on his feet, because it's the G1 and so on and so forth. And they gave it a couple of nights. They gave it a couple of nights, but he officially bowed out on night 5, where it was decided that he would not be medically cleared for the rest of the G1. So all of his matches were forfeited. That's why we have all this points, so many points distributed, even though there haven't been necessarily all that many matches, because Kidd's points have all been distributed up and down the entire field so far, because everyone gets 2 points since he forfeited, and he will be out of the tournament. So it's essentially a 7-man and 9-man field, for the rest of Block B. Shingo Takagi, if you paid attention to what I said, and Shingo Takagi has 2 points, you're saying, Warren, are you telling me Shingo Takagi did not win a single match in the tournament so far? And the answer is, you are correct. Shingo Takagi has not won a single match in this tournament. The only 2 points that he has is due to the forfeit against Gabe Kidd. Like, he was actually scheduled to fight Gabe Kidd. I believe it was on night 4, I think, and night 4 or 6. I don't quite remember. Yeah. So Shingo's lost. Shingo has a losing record now. Lost to Great Khan, Takeshita, and Yoshihashi. So he's running out the bottom. And look, this is a guy that I don't think is going to. I don't think he's going to be that much of a factor. If anything, Shingo Takagi is, more and more officially now taking his spot as the Tomohiro Ishii of the tournament, where he's a guy who will go in, he'll have great matches, hard-hitting, dynamic matches, but for some reason, New Japan doesn't want to push him more than they did with the King of Pro Wrestling title not all that long ago, right? Or the Never title. Like, that's his ceiling now, which is bizarre, because this is a guy who has a tremendous crowd connection. He's dynamic, a great pro wrestler, even to this day. Not exactly the same guy, but a great pro wrestler even to this day. And, for some reason, New Japan is like, they always have cold feet when it comes to Shingo. Shingo is always like relegated a little bit to the bottom. It's so weird because there's a guy, look, because if you're not ready to push your young guys, here's a guy that's ready made for you that will have excellent matches in the top spots. No matter, he will deliver on any level you put him on. I don't know what the issue is. And the people love him. I know you don't understand it. You A+ audience, you. So yeah, and then Yoshihashi and Ren Narita, like, you know, this is like, you know, topsy-turvy cuckoo land. But, you know, fear not, friends. Zack Sabre Jr., like Yoshihashi has Zack Sabre Jr., Shota Umino, El Phantasmo, and Takeshita left. It is possible that he might win his match against El Phantasmo. But Phantasmo only has 2 wins. Well, he has 4 points to his name, 1 win essentially. I wouldn't think that, you know, I don't think that Phantasmo will stay down, you know, with only 1 victory in the G1. I don't think that's plausible. I think Yoshihashi might lose to him. I think he's probably going to lose to Zack Sabre Jr. He's very likely going to lose to Konosuke Takeshita. And Shota Umino, well, might be a little more up in the air, but I can't see Umino losing either. Like, I think Yoshihashi's, you know, big 4-match winnings or 3-match winning streak, his 8 points are, I think that's where he's going to stay right now, right? I think that I think that's going to be it. As far as Narita goes, well, honestly, like, the House of Torture stuff is so awful and so much nonsense. You know, the thing here is that he has tiebreakers over Shota Umino, over El Phantasmo, over Zack Sabre Jr., which was a complete another shock. But he still has to go through Shingo, which he might. Like I said, Shingo he's not a push commodity. Takeshita, I don't think there's any way in hell he's beating Takeshita. I think these are guys that they're gonna get tiebreakers over Narita. Maybe he'll beat Drilla Maloney, and maybe he'll qualify. But there's no way he's winning this block. No way. Like, if Ren Narita wins this block, let's say he goes into the, let's say he qualifies and goes to the block finals, I might actually not watch it. Like, I have no interest in this, and it would be the most nonsensical decision they made. I just might capitulate. I might throw in the towel and just not watch it. But they probably won't, right? They probably won't. Here I am trying to convince them, but they won't, right? Right, guys? Right, folks? They're not going to do it. Sure, Warren, whatever you say. So those are the standings so far. Those are like some high-level thoughts. You know, next week, when we get around to next week, there'll probably be some people that we can soft eliminate, if not outright eliminate as well, because we're going to be very close to the finish line. Well, very close. We're going to be much closer to the finish line. And I think we're going to start getting a real good feel as to how all of this is going to play out. But look, all of this is playing out without Gabe Kidd, like we mentioned, which is legitimately a bummer. I think he's one of the rare participants in the G1 who had real momentum going in. Probably would have made a serious run as well. I think it would have been safe to say he would have qualified for the block playoffs. I think that would have been a fairly safe assessment. You could even make an argument for him winning, and I would have bought it as well. Without a doubt, there has been a lot of finagling and rebooking going on in Block B because of his forfeiture. Like, whatever the original plan was definitely like thrown out the window. Well, of course it was. And there were a lot of people that were reshuffled around. And now, especially with a few nights in, probably had a couple of sleepless nights there on the bus with Gedo trying to get everything back into shape. But it's a bummer. Like, it's a bummer. I love Gabe Kidd. I think I've always been a big fan of his New Japan work, even when he annoyed most other people. And he still annoys a lot of people, which I don't understand. You know, when you're in an environment where you want people to show some fire and some energy and some life, and you're going, look at all these new guys, and they're all, you know, asleep at the wheel sometimes it feels like, and you have Gabe Kidd coming in, and he's all, you know, fiery and full of piss and vinegar, and then you're like, no, that's why he's out of control. He's just he's just a big old hooligan. That doesn't work for me. It's like, well, what do you want? What do you want? Because this works. Gabe Kidd works. Anyway, so it's a bummer. I hope he gets well soon. This was supposed to be a really big year for him. And I hope he can get back soon enough so we can still salvage some of it. Yeah. Bummer. Let's see what else. Oh, well, we got to talk Konosuke Takeshita. You know, I sort of mentioned it at the start. I think as it stands right now, Konosuke Takeshita is probably going to be Wrestler of the Year in my book. I don't think there's anyone who has wrestled as much with as consistent and as consistently great as he has all throughout the year. Maybe, look, we could make a case maybe for a Sari, for instance. But I think Sari just lacks the volume, like the outright sheer number of matches that Takeshita has. He's been all over the place and just wrestling these phenomenal matches, one after the other. He's been so good, and he's had the best match of the tournament so far against Shingo on night 6. Look, everything he touches is great, you know. His match with Great O'Khan on night 4 was, you know, sneaky awesome, if you ask me. And this is a guy who understands the assignment, who is the complete opposite of when I talk about New Japan, you know, and how they use how the new guys in New Japan all seem to be like not quite sure how to get the maximum out of their G1 matches. Takeshita understands it, and he is always able to squeeze every little bit of juice that is available in every of his matches. He is so good, and he has been so great. He came to this tournament to work, and if they're setting him up for some big things, they should, because I don't see anyone else right now. Again, Gabe Kidd is gone now, right? I don't see anyone else that you could effectively, confidently put into this spot and but deliver and over deliver as just a great G1 champion or a great IWGP World Heavyweight champion. You know, he's got the double contract, right? So it's not as if it's an AEW guy who's over there. He's also a New Japan guy. Well, he's got the triple contract, you know. But so it's not like he's specifically an outsider. He's part of the roster. I'm very excited for this. Like there's a lot of exciting prospects, I feel, in the future of for the future of Konosuke Takeshita. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with him. But, you know, look, if you ask me, you push this guy all the way, main event the Dome with it. You know, just as simple as that. I think this is a guy that will generate. Look, is he going to be this massive draw that's going to put in 28,000 people in the Dome? No, probably not. But the question I ask then unto you is, if not him, who is going to put on this roster right now that you wanted to main event at Wrestle Kingdom? Who would put the proverbial butts in seats? I mean, Hiroshi Tanahashi's final match is going to put butts in seats. They're probably going to have some real exciting opponent for him. Aaron Wolf, they're debuting him at Wrestle Kingdom, and that is not an accident, folks. It's not an accident. So again, who, yeah, Zach is champion right now. Zach is not a drawing champion. We know this. His last year's run and early this year proves it. He is not a drawing champion. You put it back on Goto. Look, Goto was a drawing champion. And I think before he got injured, his numbers started to dwindle. It started trailing off a little bit. So I'm not sure Goto is the guy either, where you're like an instant like sellout of the dome. Like, again, who if not Takeshita? Who else? There's no one else. Well, might as well go with a guy who can completely go all out, right? Right. Hey, you know who's having a great G1, legitimately? Who is, I hear a lot of people mentioning him as the MVP, and I kind of agree. Is Taichi. God, what a workhorse he's been so far. He's been delivering every night, working hard, having that crowd connection. Night 1 versus Tanahashi was really good. His night 2 against Yuya was a lot of fun. His match with Finlay was great. To me, they're all 4-star matches. And it's wild when you think that this guy was on the chopping block. And he didn't, like, he wasn't supposed to make the cut. Let's remember, he had done the thing, right? He had done the play-in gimmick, and he lost. I was like, oh, no Taichi in the G1. And then Don Fale gets injured, so he can't do his play-in gimmick. So there's a last chance match for Taichi, and he comes in and he wins that one, and finally he's in the G1. And I don't understand why you'd keep this guy out, other than he doesn't want to do it. But I don't know why he wouldn't want to. Why look, he's not acting like he wouldn't want to do it. He's been tremendous. He has been so good in this tournament so far. He has been legitimately outstanding. And this is a guy, right? Who was around for the great years of the G1. So he's a guy who understands not unlike Takeshita, who understands the mission here. He understands what needs to be done. And he's a fan favorite. People online, in the buildings, everyone loves Taichi. Everyone loves him. And it's wild because years ago, he was probably one of the most hated wrestlers on their roster. And I still remember that stinker that he had. I can't remember, 2018, 19 for the Never title against Goto. It was such a bad match. Well, not a dud, but like such an awful match where you're not supposed to be having awful matches. Like a 2-star match. You're like, what the fuck is this? What am I watching? And it was like an 18-minute affair or something like that. He's a guy I couldn't stand. And now look at this. And they lean into the fact that he's a tough guy, that he can take your head off. He's had some great matches. I don't understand why we have the feeling that Taichi is expendable. Like in this G1, he is a breath of fresh air. He fits the bill. He understands what needs to be done. Again, his match with Tanahashi on night 1 was tremendous. Everything he's done so far, well, he had to contend with the House of Torture, but don't we all? Don't we all contend with the House of Torture? He's been great. That's the point, and it deserves to be underscored here. I talked about Yota Tsuji too, but I think he's also a bit of a talking point. Like, out of all the guys right now, all those young guys that I keep mentioning over and over again, he's the one that I feel like he understands what's happening. I think he's a guy who understands that, look, we got Aaron Wolf coming in. None of the other guys are stepping up. I should be the guy to step up. I'm going to be the guy to do it. And his crowd connection is there. Like, he's had it for a while, but I think he's really leaning into it. I think there's a lot of stuff that's clicking. We're much closer in the way he wrestles. We're much closer to that Yota Tsuji that I saw just a couple of weeks ago, wrestling against Ultimo Guerrero in CMLL, where I was sitting there hopping out of my seat and hollering at the top of my lungs. I was like, this match rules. And I was screaming, why don't we get this Tsuji in New Japan? Why can't we get this guy? And I feel we're kind of getting this guy. You know, particularly the match he had with Oiwa on night 5, which was fantastic. You know, I thought they both brought out a fire out of each other, and especially Tsuji, that I hadn't seen since the Ultimo Guerrero match. I thought he was tremendous. So, you know, maybe this is the guy. Maybe he's going to find a stride to have these great matches. Maybe it's finally clicking. Maybe it's coming together. And you know, we keep talking about Yota Tsuji as one of the young guys, but he's like, what, 31, 32? Like, he's over 30. So this is another guy where it's like, look, if it's going to happen, it's going to have to happen. It's going to have to happen soon. You know, we can't just sit around and say, oh, well, he's going to develop and grow. No, he's into his 30s now, you know, young 30s, sure. But he's into his 30s, and that's the danger zone when it comes to development as a pro wrestler. There's always exceptions. There's always people, DDP, they all scream at once, right? But not everyone, more often than not, 30s is when the body starts slowing down. Slowing. I'm not saying like suddenly everything sort of becomes a crawl and you're wrestling like Ric Flair in 2022. No, but things are going to relax, right? Things are going to start slowing down gradually. So like, this is the time. This is the time for Yota Tsuji to start picking it up. And maybe he understands. Maybe he's got it. Maybe it's clear in his head at this point. I can tell you, because I'm not in his head. And yeah, I mean, then there's the House of Torture stuff that you could all throw into the bin. I am so sick of it. So entirely sick of it. You know, I think they're dragging the tournament down. I think, look, we get it. It's heat. It's lazy heat. The matches aren't fun. You know, the crowds, the live crowds love it, but you know, it's such nonsense. And it's not even, it's the same thing we've been seeing for well over, close to 2 decades at this point, right? Whenever Bullet Club started. Like it's preposterous at this point. It's just the same thing with a different name, with a different coat of paint. You know, and it's not a stable of gaijin trying to bring in their American ways of doing things. No, it's just, you know, guys on the roster. And I'm so sick of it. I am so fed up and tired of it. And we've got 3 House of Torture guys in the tournament, right? And 2 of the Evil and Sonata. My God, what a match they had. What a match they had. It's really a bummer. It really bums me out. I'm done with these guys. I'm so done with them. So those are kind of my like big picture thoughts so far. How about we do some match recommendations? I got a little list of matches that you should go out of your way to watch, which I thought were, you know, great to excellent. We've got really one truly excellent match, if you ask me, which I already mentioned it. Konosuke Takeshita versus Shingo Takagi on July 26th. That was absolutely phenomenal, and you should absolutely go out of your way to watch it. Outside of that, maybe in order of in chronological order, on July 19th. Which was night 1. Konosuke Takeshita versus Gabe Kidd was really good. Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Taichi, already mentioned that. That's one you should check out as well. On night 2, we had Konosuke Takeshita versus El Fantasmo and Yuya Uemura versus Taichi, which was a blast as well. On July 22nd, we have 2 more matches. Taichi, once again, versus David Finlay. Picture the match in your head, and that's the one you got. It is tremendous. And then Yuya Uemura versus Yota Tsuji. On the 23rd, July 23rd, we had one match that I will strongly recommend, and that was Konosuke Takeshita versus Great Okan, which I think is a sneaky great match, but not a lot of people are talking about, but I thought it was phenomenal. On the 25th, we have Yota Tsuji versus Ryohei Oiwa, which, again, like I mentioned when I was talking about Tsuji just a few moments ago, this one lit a fire under him. I thought it was tremendous. Passionate, was good. Such a good match. And then on the 26th, along with Takeshita and Takagi, we also had Zack Sabre Jr. versus El Fantasma, which I thought was terrific. Absolutely terrific. So there you go. But look, match of the tournament so far, Shingo Takagi versus Konosuke Takeshita. That's one you absolutely have to make some time. And yeah, I mean, it's the G1. I feel there should be more, but that's what we got. It's a decent look. It's a good plate of matches. Don't get me wrong. But look, let's stop harping on that right now. So listen, that about does it for all of these thoughts. Look, if the G1 continues this pace, you know, and as maybe hopefully more and more matches, more and more guys sort of wake up and get into their matches, maybe we'll have a very satisfying tournament, you know, since the golden years. I don't know. But, you know, New Japan has to let the guys cook. That's the thing. And then on top of that, we're entering like the midway point, like, you know, like we like to say, the dog days of the tournament. Not, you know, historically not the most exciting period for the G1, but we're on, you know, you never know. Maybe everyone's just going to wake up and maybe listen to this audio and then be like, Warren is right, God damn it. And then they're going to tear the house down moving forward. Maybe. Wishful thinking on my part. But look, New Japan has to let the guys go. And if New Japan is letting the guys go, do their stuff. I mean, not let them go away, leave the company. I think they have to let them do their thing. And if New Japan is letting them do their thing, well, they have to step up and do the thing instead of following directives or instead of not believing in themselves or whatever the fuck it may be. And keep an eye on Takeshita. I'm tapping my nose here just to make sure you keep an eye on Konosuke Takeshita. This is going to be a big talking point when this tournament is over. I feel it. I can feel it in my bones. Anyway, there you go. G1 thoughts. We'll be back with another week of action recap next week here on the MrWarrenHayes Show. And that about does it for another edition of the MrWarrenHayes Show. Thank you everyone for joining me again. If you haven't already, leave a like on the video or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. I will be back on Thursday with another dynamite review here on the podcast. So be sure to be around there. Subscribe here on YouTube or on the podcast platforms and whatnot. And it would be my pleasure to continue to regale you with my thoughts on the wacky world of professional wrestling. So that's what we got coming up. And otherwise, I'll be back next week. I'll be streaming again, you know, on the YouTube channel. So subscribe there if you don't want to miss those. And I will be back for another podcast next week. In the meantime, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, a fantastic weekend. Enjoy all the pro wrestling. Go watch some Randy Orton and get back to me. And I will see you next time.